So what do you need to set up Power BI Sentinel? Well, it's software as a service, which means we host a lot of it on our own servers. However, you own and control all your own data, which means you need to create storage resources in Azure to store that information. Finally, you need to provide connection strings and global permissions so that we can read your Power BI environment and access that storage. Overall, this process takes about 30 minutes to set up. And just to reiterate more specifically, what do you need to get set up? First, you need Azure resources. Specifically, you'll need Azure Blob Storage for the reporting backups and Azure SQL for all of the metadata. Next, you'll need to provide connection strings so that the Power BI Sentinel portal knows where to look for that storage and how to access it. Third, you'll need to provide permission to access the Power BI API. And then finally, you'll need to select a license and pay for it. So who all is needed? There are 4 different roles involved, but in smaller organizations, this might all be one person, such as an IT director. First, you need an Azure technician to set up the Azure resources and copy the connection strings. Next, a global Azure admin to grant permissions for the Power BI API. Third, you'll need a Power BI admin to provide credentials to access the Power BI API. Alternatively, you can create a managed service principal to access that API. And then finally, you need someone in accounting to pay for it. Finally, where is this all done? First, you can optionally use the Power BI portal to see what region your tenant is in and see what your overall usage metrics are. Next, you can create the Azure resources and grant permissions in the Azure portal. Finally, you'll purchase a license and configure all of the settings in the Power BI Sentinel portal. In this demo, we're going to see how very quickly you can sign up for Power BI Sentinel. If you have an existing Power BI Sentinel account, then you can log in with your Microsoft credentials. Otherwise, you can sign up. The first step to sign up is to decide whether you want to pay in dollars or pounds. Then you'll need to pick a plan based on the number of reports that you need to support. Once you've picked a plan, we're going to need a billing email so that we can send you confirmation for payment. Once you've entered that email, then you're able to confirm and provide your billing details. So we'll need your address, and we'll need card information. Once you click pay, you'll go through the usual confirmation like you might expect. And then after it takes less than a minute to process payment, you can see that you've paid successfully and you have an active license. Then you can either activate by logging in, or you can use an activation link to send to someone that you want to manage it. Then you can simply log in and you have access to the Power BI Sentinel portal. In the next set of demos, we're going to see how you configure everything that you need for Power BI Sentinel to start working. In this demo, we'll walk through the various configuration pages. The 2 most important are for storage and the database. Next, you can optionally set up a service principal to provide access to the Power BI API. Finally, you can configure the admin email for invoices, and you can configure other miscellaneous settings. So let's go ahead and configure our Power BI Sentinel tenant. First thing we need to do is we need to go to Tenant Setup. And you can see that we're just going to work from left to right. The very first thing, we need to configure the storage account. Thankfully, we have a storage setup wizard, and it's extremely simple. You click on it, and then you put in the connection string that you grabbed after creating the storage account in Azure. Once you've entered it in, you can take a look. Click Save, and then you'll be able to review that storage string. If you want to double check what the value is, you can click on Show, and then Power BI Sentinel will validate that it's a usable connection string. The database is pretty much the same. You go to the wizard, and you're going to enter the connection string. As before, once you've entered it and saved it, then you can review the string and see that it's valid. This covers the 2 most critical steps for getting set up with Power BI Sentinel. After the storage is available, next you can decide if you want to use a service principal to access your Power BI tenant. This is to avoid tying access to specific Power BI admin accounts. You'll also want to specify any admin emails to receive invoice emails. Once that all looks good, you can click Save. Finally, we have some miscellaneous options or labeled Further options. Here you can set up the backup time zone. You can choose to include unused columns in documentation. You can enable ABF backups. And finally, you can try preview features like M-code parsing. After all that, you're all set. Let Power BI Sentinel run overnight to start collecting information, and you can start reviewing your environment. The last step, go to bed. Then wake up in the morning to start taking advantage of all the features of Power BI Sentinel. If you're ready to move forward with deployment of Power BI Sentinel, use the Buy Now link to get started. If you have questions and want to know more, contact us at help@powerbisentinel.com to schedule an in-depth demo with a Power BI Sentinel team member. Thanks.